Chapter 8 Life in the Fire. After the ceasefire of 1971, the entire SSG was withdrawn to recoup. My company was moved to Camry in the mountainous northern areas deep in the Himalayas to check on reported incursions of Indian troops. It took me over a month to complete the move through a most rugged terrain, and the experience offers a hint of how difficult it can be to guard borders among the highest mountains in the world. We first drove 250 miles 400 kilometers to Gilgit in jeeps on the famous Karakoram Highway, our mountain link with China. This was the time when it was under construction and was called the eighth wonder of the world. We took 10 days to get there after navigating through innumerable roadblocks and landslides along the way. From Gilgit onward, we went some distance in jeeps. Then we proceeded on mules, trekking across the Burzil Pass at 14,500 feet, about 400 meters, descending into the Minamarg Valley at 9,000 feet, 700 meters, and making the final ascent on foot to reach Camry high up at 13,000 feet, nearly 4,000 meters. This was a beautifully green pine-forested area. It was an experience of a lifetime. One has to adjust to the low oxygen in the atmosphere at these elevations. In winter, snow falls by the yard. It was a tough assignment, but we acquitted ourselves very well. I stayed almost a year in the harshest of conditions, but I really enjoyed being there and emerged more self-confident. In the winter, I used to move around to various valleys and peaks where at times few dared to go. My theory was to keep busy and active to overcome the feeling of isolation and loneliness. My move 56 life in the Fire 57 meant also contributed to a show of force to the enemy, who stay put in their bunkers throughout the winter. One of the treks I undertook in November 1972 became a real adventure. I decided to move from my location, Camry, to Muzaffarabad, the capital of independent Kashmir, reconnoitering the line of control between India and Pakistan all along the way. This meant covering a total distance of 175 miles 280 kilometers, of which the first 130 miles 208 kilometers to Athmikam were done on foot. I set out from Camry with 6 of my soldiers and a guide. Our first destination was Nekran, about 40 miles 64 kilometers away. We crossed the Camry Pass at about 13,500 feet 100 meters, went across several features at heights of over 12,000 feet 600 meters, finally descending into Nekran Valley. During the 3-day trek, we did not come across a single human being. We could move only from first light until 11 a.m. and then from about 3 in the afternoon to last light, because avalanches generally occur between 11 and 3 when the sun is brightest and the snow melts. Not that our timing was a guarantee against avalanches. Movement was hazardous at any time because at some stretches even talking loudly could suddenly initiate an avalanche. Beyond Nekran, our trip took us through the most picturesque sights. The Kishinganga River from Indian-occupied Kashmir enters Pakistan at Nekran, where its name becomes the Neelam River. Our movement from Nekran to Kel and finally to Athmikam was all along the Neelam. It was heaven on earth. With East Pakistan gone to become Bangladesh, Bhutto's largest number of seats in what was left of Pakistan gave him a dubious legitimacy. He became president of Pakistan, but he also used the absence of a basic law as a pretext to become chief martial law administrator. There was nothing to stop Bhutto from reverting to the Constitution of 1956, with amendments to the clauses that pertain to East Pakistan, but he chose raw power instead. At first I admired Bhutto. He was young, educated, articulate, and dynamic. He had 8 years' experience in government under President Ayub Khan. But as time passed, my opinion of Bhutto started to change. My brother Javed, who was principal secretary to the Chief 58 in the line of Fire Minister of the Northwest Frontier Province, told me that Bhutto was no good and would ruin the country. My brother was right. I saw how the country, and particularly its economy, was ravaged by mindless nationalization. Its institutions were destroyed under his brand of so-called Islamic socialism. Bhutto took control of virtually all the nation's industries: steel, chemicals, cement, shipping, banking, insurance, engineering, gas and power distribution, and even small industries like flour milling, cotton ginning, and rice husking, as well as private schools and colleges. the start of the destruction of our educational system. Mercifully, he did not touch textiles, our largest industry. Bhutto ruled not like a democrat but like a despotic dictator. He threw many of his opponents, including editors, journalists, and even cartoonists, into prison. He was really a fascist, using the most progressive rhetoric to promote regressive ends, the first of which was to stay in power forever. It was a tragedy because a man of his undoubted capability could have done a lot of good for his country. By the time his regime ended, I had come to the conclusion that Bhutto was the worst thing that had yet happened to Pakistan. I still maintain that he did more damage to the country than anyone else, damage from which we have still not fully recovered. Among other things, he was the first to try to appease the religious right. He banned liquor and gambling and declared Friday a holiday instead of Sunday. This was hypocrisy at its peak, because everyone knew that he did not believe in any one of these actions. Still a major, I was selected for the prestigious staff course in the Command and Staff College in 1974. I finished the course with flying colors, ending with the top grade. I was posted as a brigade major in 206 Brigade, Karachi, the most coveted assignment for a major. The brigade later saw action against revolting tribesmen in Sui and Kolu in Balochistan. I gained tremendous experience during this difficult assignment, particularly in practical planning and staff work. As a staff officer in Kolu, I developed good relations with some tribal chiefs and won over a few of them. I had to take some risks though to do this. Once a chief of a subgroup of the ferocious Mary tribe invited me for lunch to his house in the mountains, about 35 miles 56 kilometers away from our camp. I accepted and went in a jeep with my life in the Fire 59 driver and a radio operator. The only weapon I carried was a pistol. This was in violation of orders which stipulated that whenever an officer is on the move in dangerous territory, he must be accompanied by a strong armed escort in the front and rear. My behavior was reckless because I knew that the Balochi tribes admire and respect bravery. The gamble paid off. Perdadani, my host, had lined the entire route with his armed tribesmen for the protection of his guest. From then on, Perdadani became my friend and a frequent visitor to my brigade headquarters. He became entirely cooperative. Balochistan is Pakistan's largest province in area but the smallest in population. It is also the most backward. Its inhabitants are 40% Pashtun, settlers of generations ago from the northwest frontier, and 60% native Balochi. The Balok are mainly a tribal society, comprising about 77 tribes. A few among them have always been anti-government. 95% of Balochistan is administratively a B area, where the government does not exercise total authority and the local tribal sirdar or chief plays an important role. Only 5% is an A area, which comes under the regular government. A few of the sirdars in the B areas have been manipulating and blackmailing every Pakistani government for decades, using the militant mercenaries that they maintain as their local militia force. They have also kept their own tribes suppressed under their iron grip through indiscriminate use of force. I have taken on myself to convert all the B areas into A areas and establish the government writ there. So far we have managed to convert 14 of the 26 districts into A areas. Another memorable experience was my brigade's assistance in flood relief operations. Pakistan was hit by one of its worst floods in 1976, when the melting snow and glaciers combined with unprecedented rains caused all rivers, especially the Indus, to overflow. Sindh was worst affected. Our brigade was moved to Succor, which faced the most devastation. My brigade commander detailed me to take charge of filling a breach in a canal. This was beyond the purview of my responsibilities as a staff officer, but understanding the confidence that was vested in me as well as the challenge the task posed, I accepted readily. The command placed under me was unique. Other than the army engineers, I was given about 200 Hurs, members of the fabled warrior 60 in the line of fire tribe of Sindh, and 250 shackled prisoners from Succor jail. I managed this disparate force, gelled them into a team, and worked the whole night to plug the breach by morning. When the brigade commander came to inspect the situation in the morning, he was surprised and pleased. He commended me for my performance. My brigade commander found me to be not only an efficient staff officer but also a bold leader, willing to stick my neck out beyond the call of duty. My career was now well on course, given all my qualifications and achievements. Throughout this period, the political scene became more and more murky. Bhutto's despotic, dictatorial, suppressive rule led to nationwide political discontent. He set up a Gestapo-like force called the Federal Security Force, FSF, that was much hated and feared. His interpersonal dealings with friends, colleagues, and foes were so arrogant and degrading that people hated him, but were too frightened to express their feelings openly. He set up a concentration camp in a place called Dalai where opponents were fixed. The situation was something like Iran under the Shah or Iraq under Saddam. Bhutto is said to have adopted a mocking, belittling attitude even toward his own appointee as army chief, General Zia-ul-Haq. Such an attitude led to unity among all the opposition forces. In this environment, Bhutto ventured into his first election in 1977 to prove his legitimacy. The opposition formalized its unity into a political alliance called the Pakistan National Alliance, PNA. Either Bhutto became unnerved during the election campaign or he was bent on winning 2/3 of seats in the National Assembly to enable him to change from the parliamentary system to a presidential system by making a constitutional amendment, as some of his former colleagues now assert. The ballot was grossly rigged, so rigged, in fact, that the people lost their fear and came out in the streets to protest, often violently. The PNA, of course, led the protest demonstrations. The army was called out in Lahore to quell the disturbance. Bhutto imposed martial law in Lahore, but the High Court struck it down. On one occasion, the situation got so far out of control that the army was ordered to fire at the demonstrating civilians. 3 brigadiers commanding the troops were bold enough to refuse the orders to fire and opted to resign their commissions instead. These honorable and principled life in the Fire 61 Sirs were Brigadiers Ashfaq Gondal, Niyaz Ahmed, and Ishaq Ali Khan, who were then retired from service. Finally, the situation came to a head. General Zia-ul-Haq removed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's government in July 1977. He imposed martial law after suspending the constitution. I was still a major, posted at Karian as second in command of the 44th Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment. Rana Lam, who was then a major general and our general officer commanding GOK in Karian, was appointed Deputy Martial Law Administrator of the Rawalpindi Division. He had developed a liking for my professional qualities, and he chose me along with 2 other officers to establish the Deputy Martial Law Administrator's headquarters in Rawalpindi. It was a very unusual situation. While we were carrying out our duties related to martial law, we were also expected to devote time to our units, discharging our normal peacetime duties. I was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel in 1978 and given command of the 44th Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment, part of the Armored Division. Initially, I was offered the command of the 1st Self-Propelled Regiment. You will have a comfortable time there, I was told, because it was a well-established old unit. I refused. Instead, I preferred the challenge of going to the 44th, called the Men of Crisis, and raising its standards. In my 2 years in command, I melded the men and officers into one team and motivated them to a very high level, instilling in them confidence and the will to win. The unit was particularly weak in sports. In a soccer match against a rival team, we lost 9-0. We performed just as poorly in other sports. We were jeered at by other units. It was humiliating. I moved quickly to hunt for talent, organize teams, and launch an intense training program with newly hired coaches. I also concentrated on the training, operational preparedness, and administration of the unit, enhancing its all-around caliber. My men responded admirably. The result was that the next year we won many sporting events and were declared champions in training. Our administration was always highly commended by the GOC. I felt proud to turn around our average unit in 1 year into possibly the best all-around unit of the Armored Division. I had made the right choice of assignments. It is better to turn 62 in the line of fire an underperforming group around than to coast along atop an already successful one. Achieving the turnaround did not come easily. It requires real, down-to-earth leadership to motivate your men to achieve. You have to lead from the front and be better than your men, at least most of them, at anything you want them to do, especially if it's something physical. A leader has to be just, firm, compassionate, and considerate toward his men. He has to look after their welfare and help them even even with their domestic problems. That is when he starts earning their deepest respect and unquestioning obedience. I feel proud to say that I have always been loved by those under my command, and therefore I could move them to achieve anything I desired. In the morning, I ran with them in physical training, normally in the lead. I played football, hockey, basketball, and volleyball with them. I ran on the track with them. I fired small arms with them. They normally found me a better shot than most of them, and I ran grueling obstacle courses with them. Through personal demonstration, I taught them how to cross obstacles faster than ever. This is how I earned their respect. They always looked up to me. On a few occasions when there was an accident and my men were injured, I was the first to reach the hospital to donate blood for them. Giving blood is no big deal for a young, healthy man, but when soldiers see their commander giving blood, it means a lot. They knew they could count on me on any occasion. On the whole, my command of the regiment was most fulfilling. It developed more confidence in me, and I came to be known as a good leader of men. I have always believed that leadership is an art, not a science. It can be developed to some extent, but mostly it is inborn. My command was successful because I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it in no small measure because I was lucky to have a boss as outstanding as Major General Rafi Alam. I think he considered me his best commanding officer. This was evident from the reports that he wrote about me as well as from the fact that he selected me out of his entire division and outside his own staff to be taken to the martial law headquarters. It meant an appointment one rank higher than the one I actually held, Lieutenant Colonel. He appointed me as Colonel Martial Law and allowed me almost total liberty in running affairs related to martial law. Such was the trust he had in me that once when I entered life in the Fire 63 his office, I overheard him on the phone saying, "If my Colonel Martial Law has given the instructions, I know he must have done the right thing." He did not even ask me about the complaint of the man at the other end then or later. I could not restrain myself and told him bluntly, "Sir, you trust people too much, you could be taken for a ride." He shot back, "I know who I can trust." Major General Rafi Alam taught me some of the finer elements of leadership. I tried to develop many of his attributes. Once, after a long test exercise with troops in the field in the heat of summer, with a temperature of over 110 degrees Fahrenheit, he called me to a mound from where he was observing us. When I reached him, a waiter was bringing him a cold drink. Just as the general was about to take a sip, his glance fell on me, looking at him thirstily. He immediately stopped and offered the drink to me. He insisted, "Come on, bugger, you need it and deserve it much more than I do." I gulped it down. Working at martial law headquarters was a totally different and unnatural, I might add, assignment compared with the command of troops which I relished. However, here I learned that one could contribute immensely toward establishing justice and improving governance. I contributed my humble bit in a limited way within the confines of the Rawalpindi Division, which was one of the 5 divisions of the Punjab province. My stint there gave me an insight into the functioning of civil government and taught me how to interact with the civilian bureaucracy. There were both negatives and positives in this experience, all of which would come in handy when I was thrust into a situation of authority in the country. A terrible punishment during General Zia's martial law was lashing people who had committed a crime. I noticed that only the poor were given this punishment, those who were involved in petty crimes. The rich and the influential involved in large-scale crime and corruption managed to avoid this particular form of justice. One day I decided to go to the Rawalpindi jail to observe a lashing for myself. It was an ordeal just to be present at such a distasteful event, the most inhuman and humiliating that I have ever witnessed. The jailer set out a sofa for me and a table laden with cakes and pastries for my pleasure. The image of the Roman Colosseum sprang to mind. The least I could do was order him to remove the cakes and pastries immediately. 64 in the line of fire, the wretched man who was to get 5 lashes was in underpants and was tied to a wooden X-frame with his arms and legs so firmly stretched out that he could not move a muscle. The lasher was in trunks like a wrestler. The lasher began by drawing a line with a marker across the buttocks of the criminal, indicating the exact spot where the lashes were to be delivered. The lasher then lined up his cane along the prisoner's bottom with his arm stretched out. He drew a line on the ground to mark his spot, and then moved away about 5 steps. He came running and gave the first lash as hard as he could. The man tightened his muscles on the first lash, squirmed on the second, and screamed on the third. I could barely look at the fourth and fifth. I think he fainted. They untied him and he fell on the ground face down. I could see red fleshy pulp on his bottom. A crude doctor appeared, checked the miserable man, and then did the stupidest thing. He started pressing the man's bottom with his feet, with all his weight on it. Seldom have I heard a man scream louder. I have never been more disgusted, not just at the inhuman treatment but also at the unfairness of it all. I related this episode to Major General Rafi Alam and asked him to have this inhumanity stopped, at least within his jurisdiction. Bless the man's kind heart, he listened to me and told the courts not to sentence poor people to lashing anymore. I got another taste of martial law when we ordered the police to round up known miscreants to improve law and order. They very obediently arrested everyone in 2 categories in their records. I was told that these included pimps, madams, and musicians of Rawalpindi's red light area. I cursed the police and ordered their release. To my great embarrassment, they all came to martial law headquarters and started shouting slogans in my favor. Long live Colonel Musharraf. I had to tell them that if they didn't leave, I would have them rearrested. On one occasion, we ordered all drug cases to be tried in military courts. This order soon turned into a farce, as the police started arresting and trying poor people who were peddling or using just a few grams of drugs. The military courts were flooded, and we had to rescind the order. This, in brief, was my experience with martial law. I learned a few life in the Fire 65 lessons. First, whenever the army gets involved with martial law, it gets distracted from its vital military duties. Military training and operational readiness suffer. Second, when we superimpose martial law and place the military over the civilian government, the latter ceases functioning. When martial law is later lifted, the civilian functionaries remain ineffective. Their growth is stunted. Last, I learned that whatever the law, civil or military, the poor are always victims of oppression. The rich and the powerful generally remain above the law. During my tenure at martial law headquarters, I tried my best to give comfort to the poor or go soft on them and to be firm against the privileged. I believe that a poor, hungry man may have a reason to steal because the state has not provided for him, but a rich man taking bribes deserves the harsh ESD treatment because he already has plenty. In July 1978, I took 2 months leave to go abroad on a holiday with my wife. We flew to London and stayed with a relative. We then went to Chicago to visit my brother Naved, who had moved to America in 1974 to become a doctor. We spent about 10 days with him, after which we returned to London and purchased a Toyota hatchback for the long drive to Pakistan. It was a great experience. We stuffed the car with canned food, a gas stove, a tent, an air mattress, and 2 air pillows, and off we went. The route that we mapped was ideal from a tourist's point of view. We followed the Rhine River through Germany, ending at the picturesque Rhine Falls in Switzerland. From Lucerne, we drove to Italy and stayed at Lake Como, which I knew from my study of the Napoleonic campaigns in the area. Then we went across Italy from Milan to Venice, staying 2 days in Venice. From that point on, we kept the sea on our flank. Through Yugoslavia, we traveled all along the Adriatic coast, then through Greece along the Aegean coast, and through Turkey along the Black Sea coast. We stopped and stayed a day or 2 at any place that we found interesting, often at campsites on the beach. This journey of a month and 7 days was inexpensive, and is one whose memory we fondly cherish. In 1979, I was posted to the Command and Staff College as an instructor. This is a highly prized appointment awarded to all top lieutenant colonels, and it is where I developed my public speaking skills. Normally, instructors inherit lecture notes, which we call pinks because 66 in the line of fire they are written on pink paper. After trying this system for a while, I decided to lecture without the pinks and to add my own thoughts and ideas from practical experience. I was a successful instructor and quite a popular one. The 2 years I spent there from 1979 to 1981 were extremely rewarding professionally. They were also very enjoyable socially, as we were a small and close-knit community. Seba and our children enjoyed these years greatly. Staff College had its own distinct life and culture, with students from about 15 countries. I was in charge of the foreign students and enjoyed my interaction with them, especially when I took them on a tour around Pakistan. I was also responsible for extracurricular activities at the college. That assignment had its hazards. In 1980, we were to celebrate our Platinum Jubilee, the staff college having been erected in 1905. Pervez Zia was to grace the occasion. I was therefore to arrange a special program in the evening. I did so by getting Pakistan's cultural troupe to perform. This troupe included the most prominent male and female musicians and dancers, and had showcased Pakistani culture abroad. 2 days before the event, however, when the artists were on a train from Lahore to Quetta, I received an urgent call from the commandant. He told me, to my utter consternation, that the president did not want any song or dance performed, least of all by women. He shocked me further by saying that the president did not even want the troupe to land in Quetta, lest the fundos, slang for fundamentalists, got wind of it. Despite my protests, I was told to execute the order. The train had already left Lahore. How could I stop the artists from reaching Quetta? I telephoned the sub-martial law administrator, a brigadier, at Sukkur, a town in the middle of Sindh province, at midnight, and told him about the crisis. I asked him to intercept the train, detach the compartment of the artists, and attach it to any Lahore-bound train. The brigadier's first response was quite unfriendly and offensive. How dare a lieutenant colonel wake him up in the middle of the night and ask him to undertake this task? I had to drive home to him the point that both his reputation and mine were at stake with the president. As his groggy mind awoke, he jumped into action and performed the task beautifully, with military precision. The mission was accomplished by 2 a.m. I wish I had been there to see the artist's life in the Fire 67 expressions the next morning, thinking that they were getting off at Quetta, only to discover that they were back where they started. President Zia in the 1980s completed what Bhutto had started in the dying phase of his regime: the total appeasement of the religious lobby. Zia did not have a political base or lobby. By hanging Bhutto, he turned Bhutto into a martyr and his political party, the PPP, into a greater force. Zia found it convenient to align himself with the religious right and create a supportive constituency for himself. He started overemphasizing and over-participating in religious rituals to show his alignment with the religious lobby. Even music and entertainment became officially taboo, whereas I am told that in private he personally enjoyed good semi-classical music. From being an instructor, I went back to being a student. I was sent to the National Defense College, NDC, in Islamabad for the Armed Forces War Course. This is considered a landmark progression in an Army officer's career, because if you haven't done a war course at the NDC, you will not make it to general. Military history, military strategy, political and border geography, and most of all operational strategy are the main ingredients of this course. Operational strategy is taught through several very realistic war games and map exercises. I think my strength in mathematics facilitated my comprehension of the main elements of war: time, space, and relative strength. I did very well in the course and was graded among the top students. My planning and execution of military operations and my confidence during presentations were highly commended. The course was most useful in grooming me for the highest command or staff or instructional appointments. I came out of the course a much more self-confident officer, prepared for higher ranks. I knew now that if all went smoothly, I would make it to general. After the war course, I was back in Karian, this time in command of the 16th Self-Propelled Regiment, with which I had fought the War of 1965. I was still a lieutenant colonel and was again detailed as the colonel martial law in Rawalpindi. This time my tenure was not as pleasant as it had been under Rafi Alam. My new boss was rough-hewn and known for keeping subordinates under pressure. Adapting myself 68 in the line of fire to him was not easy. We clashed on several occasions. Once I asked the police to remove an obstruction on a road caused by construction. Instead, I was very harshly admonished by my commander on the phone. The next day, when he came from Karian to Rawalpindi's Mar Teal Law headquarters, I went to his office in a very somber mood and asked him to relieve me of my appointment and allow me to go back to the command of my regiment. Because, I said, if I have to be ticked off for doing the right thing, I will not know how to make decisions in the future. This came as a shock to him, He pacified me by praising my overall performance. I continued with martial law duties, and fortunately he became much more careful in dealing with me. From 1983 to the middle of 1984, I was posted to the Military Operations Directorate as Deputy Director Military Operations, DDMO. I was also approved for promotion to the rank of Brigadier General, but had to settle temporarily for full colonel because there were no vacancies at the brigadier level. My short time at the Military Operations Directorate was not as rewarding as it should have been, mainly because my boss lacked the ability to inspire and teach. However, I did witness operational planning at the highest level of the Pakistan Army. When the Siachen Glacier conflict between India and Pakistan erupted, I was part of all that happened. The conflict persists to this day. Siachen is a long glacier almost at the junction of India, Pakistan, and China, in the Karakoram Range. From the Pakistan side, the approach to it is blocked by the Saltoro Range, with passes from 17,000 to 21,000 feet, 5,200 to nearly 6,400 meters high. In 1983, we had learned that India quite frequently intruded into the Siachen Glacier, which belonged to us. We dispatched a team from the Special Services Group SSG to confirm the reports. They confirmed the intrusions because they came across telltale evidence of a hurriedly abandoned camp on the glacier, left by some Indian personnel. At General Headquarters GHQ, we began planning to occupy the passes on the watershed of the Saltoro Range that dominated the Siachen Glacier. Winter had set in and we had no experience of operating at such heights over 16,000 feet 800 meters, or at temperatures that could fall to 50 degrees below 0 Celsius 58 C. With wind life in the Fire 69 chill. The key decision was when to occupy the passes. Time was critical because we assumed that the Indians would try to occupy the same passes, now that they already knew that our SSG team had crossed into the glacier from the Saltoro Range. We suggested early March to ensure that our forces got to the passes first, just as the worst of winter had passed. We were opposed by the general officer commanding the northern areas, who had jurisdiction over this area. He felt that the harshness of the terrain and the low temperatures would not allow our troops to reach there in March. He proposed May 1 instead. His op in Ayan prevailed because he was the commander on the spot. This proved to be a mistake. When we went there, we found the Indians already in occupation of most of the dominating features on the Saltoro Range beyond the Siachen Glacier. Still, our troops moved up and performed the challenging task of occupying heights and features around the Indian positions. The result was a series of positions by both sides at great heights within shooting range of each other. Many precious lives have been lost to enemy fire and to hazardous weather and terrain. The Indians suffer far more than we do. It takes them 3 to 7 days of trekking over the Siachen Glacier with all its crevices to occupy the passes. On the Pakistan side, a gravel road reaches close to the Saltoro Range. Troops can climb to any of the passes in 1 day after traveling by jeep. Innumerable small skirmishes have taken place at various locations along the entire front, whenever either side has attempted to readjust or occupy new heights. In the initial stages, the Indians undertook several such endeavors only to realize very quickly that the attempts were futile. They suffered very heavy losses. Later, we were amused to see a change in their strategy. Their troops would transmit stories and communications about what can best be called fake encounters with the enemy while nothing actually was happening on the ground. Several times, when we picked up such intercepts, our GHQ would get worried and initiate a flurry of signals asking for clarification of the operational situation from the forward posts, only to be told that all was quiet. India has the largest film industry in the world, and is rightly famous for making highly romanticized and unrealistic movies. So it came as no surprise to us when we intercepted the Indians' communications about the fake skirmishes and encounters that they were regularly having with the Pakistan Army in 70 in the line of FL re their fertile imagination. We actually started enjoying listening in on their make-believe actions. The imaginative details included enemy attacks and the gallantry of their defense. Later, our amusement turned to hilarity when these fake encounters became the basis for recommendations and nominations for awards for gallantry. Now, much later, it appears that the Indian top brass has discovered the tricks that their forward troops have played. There have been several courts-martial against defaulting officers and commanders for such serious lapses of character. On several occasions, we also intercepted messages about casualties on the Indian side and the inability of the Indian troops to evacuate them because of bad weather and harsh terrain. The dead would lie for days before being evacuated by helicopter. The snow and freezing temperatures created a natural mortuary. The confrontation at Siachen is one of the major skirmishes we have had with the Indians on the roof of the world. The other serious, nearly full-scale conflict we had was the Kargil episode, which I shall discuss later. Other than these two, the line of control that separates Azad Kashmir from Indian-occupied Kashmir has always remained volatile. Exchanges of fire, artillery duels, and sniper activity have been an almost daily occurrence. All this goes to show that when two neighbors are hostile, extreme terrain or extreme weather is no obstacle to their engaging each other.